Thank you, Paul. Before I start, I just want to say thanks to my friend John Firth. He's the owner of a few diamond mines, and part of the inspiration of Diamonds in the Dust came as a result of me working with him in one of his diamond mines in the desert. So initially it was Diamonds in the Desert. So I changed it to Diamonds in the Dust, and in the dirt, and in the dark, and whatever D you would like to add to it. My talk is about diamonds in diversity. I once heard the story about this American from Texas who came to South Africa, and he bought himself what we call a plot. They call it a ranch in Randkiesfontein, you know, here between Joburg and Pretoria. And after he's fixed up his ranch, obviously he was now looking for a horse. And he was told to go to Brits, where Mr. Van Vuren is. He's a good guy with horses. He's a very honest man. He knows his horses, and he could really get a good deal with him. So he went to Brits, took all the trouble, knocked at the door and say, "Good morning, Mr. Van Vuren. I'm from Texas, and I believe you can sell me a good horse. So I'm here to buy a horse from you." "Yes, like," Mr. Van Vuren said. "So you from Texas, hey? A real cowboy. But you guys know about horses, man." "But sir, there are my horses. You can go and have your pick." So the Yankee went, and after a while he picked his horse, and he came back and said, "Well, sir, I've decided to have this horse." And Mr. Van Vuren looked at the horse and said, "Okay, sir, I'm not going to argue with you, man. You are the expert, but I'm just telling you, this horse don't look so good." You look at it, said, "Oh, of course I can see, but I brought my groom from the States, and after 3 weeks, 4 weeks, I will come and show you this horse. You won't recognize it." 3 weeks' time, he came back, not with the horse, but with a lot of anger and frustration in his heart. Knocked at the door again. And when Mr. Van Vuren, with his friendly face, opened the door, he went for him and said, "You scoundrel, you're a real liar. They told me you are so honest." And Mr. Van Vuren said, "Listen, this Yankee is not going to insult me in my lounge. I'm going to give him the 5-point plan and help me out of here." But before he gave him the 5-point, he said, "Sir, but what is the problem?" He said, "That horse is as blind as a bat. He can't see a thing." He said, "Sir, but don't you remember I told you that horse don't look so good?" You see, when we deal with different cultures and diversities, we always have these problems of communication. So make sure next time when you listen that we understand each other. It's not only communication that is a problem. It's also understanding various cultures. And some of these cultural blunders can be very costly. As this marketing manager from America took up a promotional post in the Middle East to market their cola. I was told it was Pepsi Cola, but let's leave that out. So he went there with all his experience, and he's going to market this product in the Middle East. And being culturally very sensitive, he came out with this idea, which he gave to the marketing people. There lies a man exhausted in the desert. Drink our cola, exhilarated, rejuvenated, running in the desert. Good concept, won't you agree? Marketing people took it and jazzed it up, and market advert went out, but it was a total disaster. Guess why? Arabs read from the right to the left. And the message was totally wrong. Here I am running in the desert, okay, drinking your cola, thanks for warning me. It's not going to energize me. I will drink it at night before I go to sleep. And this is the problems that we often have with so-called diversity programs. Diversity programs teach people about the do's and the don'ts of culture, what we eat, what we drink, we would like to go one step further today and say diversity is not only about that. When diversity becomes adversity, when the habits of other people starts to frustrate you, when you can't live with him, you know it, you understand it, but you don't like to live with it in the same house, on the same team. We also want to take the concept of culture one step further and say culture is not only those ethnic founded differences in habits and values that we have. There's a thing what we call self-culture. That is the personal expression that you have through the filters of culture. And you find that even in your own house. Mommy comes from one lineage, as we saw this morning from Annie. 2 different parents, 2 different cultures, 2 different households. And how do we deal with those conflicts in the household? So today, we would like to introduce the concept of flip side intelligence or intercultural intelligence. It's called flip side to say that if we have a coin and it's only printed on the one side, it's useless unless you print it on the other side. And the ability, the intelligence that we need to see the other side and to extract value from the other side, that is what we need to deal with diversity in the workplace today. So we're going to share with you 3 points. Number 1, we ground this whole concept of flip side intelligence in the whole notion of polarities. Sharon is going to share that with us now. And then how do we respond to these adversities and these conflicting polarities that we face? And I'm going to share with you 2 types of leaderships, 2 types of approaches to this. And then we're going to demonstrate to you very briefly 3 competencies that you and I can acquire to help us to deal with incompatibility. So, in short, flip side intelligence is the ability to deal with incompatibility. Let's look at polarities.
Wouldn't it be great if all problems were solvable, like a car breaking down or a computer crashing? There is an answer, you can solve it. Or the light blows in your office and you know how to do that, you know how to change the globe. Wouldn't it be great if there was an answer to all our problems? But what do you do in your teams at work when there just is this problem with a boss and you just cannot see eye to eye with him or her? Or in your team, there's conflicts between team members and you just can't sort it out and you just keep banging your head against the proverbial brick wall. And to take it closer to home, in your marriages with your spouses, what do you do when you just can't seem to find a solution to inherent problems, no matter how much counseling you go for? Now, these kinds of problems are very, very different to the solvable ones. And we call them polarities to manage, because we often find that at the heart of those insolvable problems, there's a polarity to manage. What do you do in those situations when you've got to make decisions at work about should we be more structured or more flexible? Should we focus on rewarding our individuals or should we reward the teams? Should we control more or empower more? There is no clear-cut answer. And the problem is that we get stuck in these polarities and we oscillate one from the other. At a more personal level, in the wellness industry that I work in, I often find with people in my workshops that they're struggling with inner turmoil because there are polarities deep within their fiber, within their personalities, that are pulling them apart. The other day, last Saturday, I ran a workshop, and halfway through explaining this concept, I saw the one girl had tears streaming down her face. And I said, "What's wrong?" She says, "I've just realized that I've got within me a dictator that wants control and discipline, and on the other side, I've got a wild child that wants freedom, that wants to let her hair down, that wants to eat and drink too much, that wants to party. And I've just realized that for 25 years, I've been in inner misery because these 2 polarities within myself have been at war with each other. They just cannot make peace." You see, the problem with polarities is that we get stuck. We get stuck. For example, we realize that in our organization, we are being too controlling because we happen to have a strength for control. Some of you sitting here today will have a particular strength. You're very, very good with control. But the problem is we get stuck and we overdo it. And of course, as you get stuck and you overdo it, the issue is that you start experiencing the downside of control, which is rigidity. Any strength overdone becomes a weakness. And then people with an either-or mindset, they think the typical solution when they get stuck and they experience the downside is they jump to the other extreme. Let's start having more freedom, empowering our staff. They send their managers on a course on how to empower. And they jump to the other extreme of freedom because they feel that will be the solution. And they overdo that. And of course, freedom overdone becomes chaos. They experience the downside of that. And then they think, oh, no, we need to get more control. And they jump to the other one again. And so the infinity loop kicks into our lives, both at a very personal level, when we jump between the dictator and the wild child, and the dictator and the wild child within ourselves, and within our teams, where, with our staff, we tend to move from one polarity to the next. The essence of what we're sharing today is that for us to manage adversity and diversity in ourselves and in our teams, we need the ability to manage polarities. Much of your conflict, personally and at work, is about that.
Thank you, Sharon. In Knowledge Works, my colleagues in Dubai has done extensive research on the whole notion of culture. And we came up with a very interesting discovery that in many cultures we have underlying polarities. And in the book you will see that we have identified 12 dimensions of the so-called corporate culture. For instance, how do we take decisions? Rules or relationships? And if Sharon just shared with us, if you overdo rules, you get rigidity. If you overdo relationships, you get chaos. So instead of oscillating, we have developed the notion of intercultural intelligence. How can we hold the polarities? The other very interesting concept which I would like to share with you is 3 worldviews. If you look at the world, and it's based on the work of Roland Miller, you will find 3 basic worldviews, which culminates not only in individuals, in teams, all over you find it. And we used a metaphor of 3 basic colors: blue, green, and red. And with those 3 basic colors, you can develop, guess how many other colors? Any guess? 16.7 million colors. So these 3 worldviews we find not in its purest form, but as a blend. And we have developed a very interesting assessment tool that we use in the workshops for people to understand what their blend is and to share some understanding. It's very valuable as a team-building exercise. But let's look at guilt versus innocence. That is a polarity that we find mostly in the Western world. North America, Europe, and other Western countries. It is rooted in the Roman culture. You remember the Romans came up with legislation and laws and legal agreements, and people in that mindset, you will find them entering into agreement. They have 20, 30 pages of contracts. This is how they do business. In the workplace, these are the guys who want policies and procedures for everything. Huh? It stands up in the court. But you find in the workplace also the so-called honor-shame. And that is something that stems from Asia, especially in the Middle East. The Arabs, if they do business, for them, it's not so much an issue of a contractual arrangement. And many Americans burn their fingers in the Middle East. After a couple of months, they come back after having signed the contracts, deals signed, let's go and do the business. They found the Arabs are dragging their feet and they don't know what's going on. Just to realize that that deal didn't really bring honor to the extended family. And the elders say, listen, we don't think you should go on with that.